That's for the blooper reel. Okay.
Okay, hi everyone. Welcome back to What's New in Creative AI for May. We're actually recording this at 9 p.m. on Tuesday night before this goes out on Thursday. So sorry if we have slight dips in energy, but we're going to try and keep it up.
Going to push on through. There's a lot to cover. What's coming up?
So we're starting off with talking about Meta's AI vision. Talk about what Mark Zuckerberg announced last week.
The Zuck.
And then we're going to talk about AI and e-commerce and how they're coming much more closely aligned.
Coming to a shopping basket near you.
For sure. And then we'll do our usual. We'll talk about the creative AI platforms. We'll run you through all the updates. The stuff
Big stuff from Adobe and Canva this month.
And then we'll move on to what's out there in the wild. AI in the wild, campaigns, all that stuff.
Oh yeah, I'd forgotten about that bit.
Yeah.
Yikes. Okay, let's go.
Okay, so Mark Zuckerberg and
has managed to piss off everybody in the advertising industry in one go.
Exactly. They held their first AI conference called Llama Con. And Mark gave an interview about what he wanted for AI and Meta. Jules, what did he want? What's his ambition?
Well, yeah, he said, Meta, we're going to do 4 things to own AI going forwards. And number 1, he said, he's basically going to take over the entire advertising industry. He's going to build agents that will work across Instagram and Facebook and WhatsApp that you will be able to state your business goal. Are you trying to build awareness? Are you trying to grow your customer base? Are you trying to sell a product? And it will automatically identify the audience, build the adverts, target them at the right people, iterate 1 billion times until it finds the highest performing creative, and then report it all back to you and let you know what it's done.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's a lot of stuff. And I get because they own all that stuff that they can do that stuff.
Yeah. He's also said a couple of other things. He said that, first of all, he wants to not just do advertising, but he wants to do sales and customer service bots through all of his messenger apps as well.
Through WhatsApp.
Yeah, through WhatsApp and through Instagram messages, I think.
Yeah.
And then he's also been talking about wanting to own the new platform for AI. So we've had touchscreen phones dominate the internet for the last 10 years. And Zuck has got his alliance with Ray-Ban, and he's convinced that glasses are going to be the AI platform of the future. Why glasses? Because they're the only thing that can see what you can see and hear what you can hear that you're happy to stick on your face, quite frankly. So he's betting big on glasses.
They'd have to make very stylish glasses, though.
They'd have to be octagonal.
Yeah.
That's what he's been talking about.
Yeah, he has, and I mean that's pretty major bold announcements he's making there.
He's not looking to make any friends.
No, he's really not, and there's been massive backlash, of course, from our industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they had some common themes to that backlash. Really, there's kind of like the existential thing, which I think is probably what hits you first when you hear his vision.
Yeah,
it's like,
just automate advertising from start to finish.
Yeah, and then there's, I guess, the suspicion about it, and they own all this infrastructure, and how the kind of like dark secrets behind it all.
Well, I guess there's a lot of it requires a lot of trust in the platform, right, to be able to do that.
I mean.
So
yeah.
First of all, how do you know if your ads are really performing the way that they are and the way that Meta is billing you is the right amount to be billing you and all that kind of thing? They've had trouble with this in the past with attribution of advertising. And, this is kind of Meta marking their own homework when they get to create the ad and tell you how well it performed. So a lot of people feeling that there's a bit of a conflict of interest going on there, and can you really trust them?
Yeah, and then there's the age-old thing, I mean as old as AI, it's about the copyright concerns around it as well.
Yeah, so what happens if it ends up using a headline that looks very similar to the headline of somebody else and they go after you saying that you've infringed their rights? So it uses an image that looks like very similar to somebody else's. And if all of this is happening in an automated fashion, how are you going to know?
Yeah, how will you know? But I think what's really interesting, if you kind of take a step back from like the instinctive industry reaction, is like, well, who's going to benefit from this? And I think what we think and what most people think is it's really small businesses, because it lowers that barrier to entry.
I think this is something we've seen with every sort of technological revolution, if you like, in the creative sector. It allows more people to do more stuff.
Yeah.
We saw it with digital. Everybody was able to get a website suddenly, and every mum and pop shop around the world could sell to anybody else anywhere in the world. We saw it with digital photography and film, where things that used to be only in the realm of brands that could afford TV commercials, suddenly every company could make a brand film and have it on their website. And now we're starting to see this now where previously only companies with the budgets to be able to afford good advertising and marketing agencies have been able to do sophisticated campaigns, and now Zuck is saying, well, I'm going to let anybody do that.
So it's really huge. Some people think, it's unachievable, and
for brands that want to experiment, I mean, one of the things about this is, you don't know what content it's creating and where it's putting that content.
Yeah.
So are you happy to trust the algorithm, not to have your product pop up next to some horrendous hate figure or something like that? I don't know. We've seen examples of that previously, and now lots of brands have lots of brand safety checks around where their programmatic ads appear. How's all that going to work? Because traditionally Meta hasn't had that kind of capability.
So I think the test will really be how they can mitigate against these things to make it really usable.
To some extent, the fact that these language models can interpret the web page that they're landing on or what have you does, in theory, allow them to be more accurate in terms of how they place ads against the right kind of audience and the right kind of sentiment of article. But we'll see how that actually plays out in practice. I'm sure there will be some howlers at some point.
Yeah, so something to keep an eye on and keep up with for sure. Right, so let's move on to shopping.
Okay, so, the flip side of... I was going to say, it is your favourite topic. Goodness. So that's why Spark has to keep going, guys. So shopping, I mean, we've just talked about advertising. Why do we advertise? To get people to shop. Yeah. So what's happening there?
Yeah, so this is a shift that probably is more than it initially appears. So OpenAI is integrating directly being able to shop within the ChatGPT interface. They've formed a partnership with Shopify. It's not live yet, but it's but the API is there.
I think the API is live now.
Yeah,
they've certainly been They've been demoing this functionality.
Yeah, and I think it sounds more like just a sort of novel. It's way more than just a novel feature. It's something that can be very disruptive. I guess both to the traditional online shopping kind of channels, and to online advertising.
100%.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us more about it?
Yeah. So what's going on? So ChatGPT are integrating shopping cart functionality directly into the chat. What does that mean? Well, these things can already search the internet. So you could say, okay, I want the best pair of running shoes for less than 100 quid. It will go off, scour the internet, come back, read all of the reviews, and actually then suggest, maybe ask you a few questions. What style of running do you do? What distance, etc.? What color do you like? And then it will present you with 4 or 5 options and just go, well, these are the best running shoes for you. And you will literally be able to click and buy them straight through ChatGPT and never go to the retailer's website. So this is the functionality that they've been demonstrating. They're starting off with just certain categories of products. I think they're starting off with beauty and homeware. Not quite sure why. But and then going to roll it out across more and more categories as the technology matures. But compared to how e-commerce has been working in the past, you had to attract somebody to your website, you then had to show them that you had the right product, you then had to convince them to buy, and you then had to give them a seamless fulfillment opportunity to pay for that and get it delivered. Now, ChatGPT is taking all of that away from you and saying, we'll just do that.
Really interesting. I wonder if they're starting with beauty and homeware, because that's often like you buy one item when you're doing those, when you're shopping for those things,
maybe,
rather than doing a haul.
Yeah, maybe it's a lot easier just to sell a lipstick.
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, this ties in closely with Operator that we saw released just before Christmas, this is where ChatGPT can actually take control of a web browser and take actions out in the digital world on your behalf. So you can see how these technologies are coming together now.
Yeah.
And why have they partnered with Shopify? It's the biggest e-commerce platform on the web. They have millions and millions of Shopify-powered e-commerce stores out there. So clearly, we talked about previously, like who benefits from Zuck rolling out automated advertising? Small businesses, probably. And again, who benefits from this? Maybe it's small businesses again. Like, you're still going to go to Amazon if it's something that you know that's on Amazon, perhaps.
Yeah.
But suddenly,
Maybe.
does this allow those millions of Shopify customers to place their products in front of, ChatGPT are now saying they have 800 million weekly users. So, a tenth of the world's population.
Yeah, but, at the moment it's not clear how ChatGPT will be prioritizing those.
This messes around with how e-commerce has worked in the past. Like, how does your product place there? They're saying that none of the placements will be sponsored at the moment, that it will be based just on the results of the language model. You can't pay to place your ad in the search results. Who knows? Maybe in future you will, and it'll have to be transparent about that, hopefully, rather like Google is about adverts, because otherwise you wouldn't trust the LLM.
No.
But what's this doing? If we think of our traditional marketing funnel...
Well, it's massively collapsing it. It used to go from search to browse, then you'd compare, maybe you'd use a comparison site, maybe you'd read lots of reviews, then you go to the cart, then you check out. But it's now like...
Yeah, now it's just like, find me a pair of red trainers for £100. Bang.
Yeah.
I want some red trainers.
Oh, do you?
No,
I'm not red. Like we said earlier, it massively competes with Amazon and more conventional now.
Homeware, John Lewis, they're coming for you.
Yeah. But it's not just OpenAI, is it?
So obviously this, the big payment companies are exploring what happens when all of this kicks off as well. So Visa and Mastercard have both recently announced big AI-powered payment initiatives, because one of the things that happens is, well, if you've got operator going off and buying something for you, has it got your credit card details? How do you keep those secure? How do you make sure that somebody doesn't do a prompt injection attack and steal your credit card data? Somebody's going to do it, let's face it. So Mastercard and Visa are trying to create like AI safe payment mechanisms, and obviously they want to become the standard by which it's done, so that they can continue to skim their transaction fees off every transaction.
Yeah, so it's kind of a fight between industries that you wouldn't expect to be fighting, because they've got this commonality of commerce.
Yeah, if you think, we're right back in the 90s again, when people were figuring out how does commerce on the internet look, and advertising on the internet look, and people are having to figure that out now with AI. Like, the paradigm is changing, and nobody knows quite how to present these options to consumers, how consumers are going to behave when they are presented with them. And there's real opportunities here for agencies that figure this stuff out, and technology companies that figure this stuff out. And everybody's scrambling to be first to figure that out. If we think back to the 90s with advertising, the first thing we did was replicate what happened in the physical world, right? We had, we're used to billboards and posters and things. So we invented display advertising. We basically put posters on the internet. And then Google came along and figured there was a better way to do that, and actually tied AdWords to people's search intent. Bang, and created the most profitable company on earth. So, OpenAI is trying to unlock what that looks like for e-commerce. And, for the clients you serve, they are going to want to understand how that works, and they're going to want you, their agency, to help them understand how that works, and then create the campaigns and assets and all the other things they need to be able to capitalize on that opportunity. So it's important to stay abreast of what's going on in this space, because e-commerce is going to change, and e-commerce is 20% of global commerce these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's probably going to be a very different way of shopping. It's going to be conversational in the same way that we have conversations with ChatGPT.
You're going to be able to chat with the e-commerce site, not just browse it, right?
Yeah, so I think, now it's not just about having a website anymore if you're an e-commerce brand. It's, it's about ensuring your products and your brand are visible to the AI agents.
So what does that look like? Who knows?
We don't know yet.
But it's evolving fast.
We don't have the answers. But we all need to keep abreast with it.
Yeah, I feel this is something that we've been kind of touching on for like 6 to 9 months in these sessions. We've talked about how agents are coming and now we're really starting to see it. Like, when you can just search and buy a product straight through ChatGPT, something's changed.
Yeah, and I think for what it means in terms of the skills in our industry, there's something in like conversational design and marketing in that way. I don't know quite what that skill is yet, but I feel like there's going to be something that emerges there.
Maybe, yeah, and certainly, like, how does your brand show up to an LLM?
Yeah,
is going to be important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, big news. So shall we move on to the more straightforward part, where we talk about some tools?
Okay, great. So it's not the industry turning upside down anymore.
No,
it's just here's a cool new thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, what's the cool new thing?
Let's start with Adobe. Good old Adobe. They had Adobe Max.
Adobe Max.
I think a couple of weeks ago. Maybe it was last week.
End of April.
End of April. It's beginning of May now, roughly that. So they are keeping up that arms race with their AI competitors, and they've just launched Firefly version 4. Yeah,
so we don't talk about Firefly and Adobe that much on this show, mainly because they haven't had a terribly competitive product, even though most of us have access to it for free because we're all Creative Cloud subscribers. Yeah. It's just not been as good as Midjourney, for example, or Runway for video.
Yeah, but they've made quite big leaps forward in quality this time, haven't they, and control?
Well, yeah, so I haven't had a chance to get stuck in yet, but that is what they're saying. They're saying version 4 is a big improvements in photorealism, big improvements in detail, and on video side as well. They've got a normal model and they've got an ultra model, which will only create one image at a time instead of the usual 4. And they're saying that they have much more control on the video side as well, with being able to dictate camera angles and movement and style. And they're integrating that directly into Premiere Pro as well, so you'll be able to generate clips within Premiere Pro right within your timeline. And for the first time, they've got text to vector as well. So you're able to not just produce JPEGs and PNGs like we have in the past, but actually you can produce vector graphics that then scale perfectly, and you can bring them into Illustrator or InDesign and manipulate them.
I mean, that's really great.
Yeah. So so we need to have a little dig around and just see how good it is.
Let us know as well if any of you are using it.
We know.
Is it out?
Yeah, it is out. So, and we know that certainly, agencies can be pretty nimble about what technology they use. But for those of you watching in marketing teams at corporates, we know that the environment, the tools you can use are often much more restricted, and Firefly is generally one you are allowed to use because it's essentially built into Creative Cloud. So,
yeah, and because really Firefly has a couple of key kind of advantages, is that it is integrated already, so you're not buying a new tool, so you don't have to go through that bureaucracy hoops of buying something new.
And some of it's literally integrated into the tool, like you don't even really know you're using AI some of the time, right?
But then there's also the commercial safety, and
I think that's what makes it attractive to a lot of corporates is Firefly is only trained on Adobe's own images, which is its strength and its weakness. The strength means it gets through compliance and legal departments much more easily. The weakness is its training data set is a fraction of what someone like Midjourney's or Ideograms is.
So it's not going to be as good.
When I say a fraction, probably literally a 1,000th of the size.
But in an intriguing twist to the storyline of Adobe, they are forming partnerships with OpenAI and Google.
They are. So
who have better models than them.
So they're integrating VO2, Google's latest video model, into Firefly as well. So, we might see that they try to make up some of the weaknesses they've got with strategic alliances there.
Yeah.
What's in it for Google is they get in front of creatives with people who wouldn't normally touch it.
What that means for the commercial IP side, I'm not quite sure yet. So we'll have to work that out as they start releasing more information about that.
So if you're a big Firefly user, let us know how you're getting on. When we get the time, we will dip in. Maybe we'll do a Midjourney Firefly head-to-head.
You were telling me something earlier about the enterprise plan.
Yeah, good point. So whilst I was doing a bit of digging on this story, it turns out that there are certain elements to Firefly which are only available for customers on Adobe's enterprise plan, which I hadn't been aware of, if I'm honest. Now, a lot of agencies will probably just be on regular Creative Cloud subscriptions, but big corporates will often have enterprise accounts. And they have released some features that are just available for enterprise. One, you can train your own model on your brand assets. So it will be able to replicate on-brand imagery much, much more accurately. You can train it on a product, or you can train it on a visual style. So that's pretty interesting. The second thing that they've built in is brand guardrails, a brand checker, if you like. So you can vet all of your team's generated assets to confirm that they're using the right colors, the right fonts, etc. And it'll flag anything that it thinks might not comply with your brand guidelines. So you can empower your team and not worry that they're going to run amok and destroy your brand. So those are pretty interesting features. So we're going to be trying to see if, given the role we play, whether we can get access to an Adobe Enterprise account for Firefly and test out some of those features too.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. But it wasn't just Adobe in April who were making big announcements. Also Canva, there's something about April. So Canva had their big conference as well, Canva Create, and they took a slightly different tack. So what they're starting to do is sort of bridge the gap between productivity and creativity. It's really interesting how they've taken this positioning rather than trying to replicate
they're not just trying to build an image model that's better than somebody else's.
Yeah.
Because they know they're not going to win that race, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's crowded already. But what they are thinking is, how do you just empower marketing teams to use this stuff in more useful ways? I think they're thinking about kind of production workflows here, really.
I think so, and I think they're really honing in on their core audience of in-house marketing teams. Yeah.
So, what are they rolling out?
So, they've developed Canva Sheets, which is essentially an AI, like an Excel sheet, but internally within Canva.
And what they're pushing with that is what they're calling data-driven design. And we've talked in the past about sort of data-driven asset generation is something that generative AI kind of unlocks. But up until now, it's been kind of clunky to actually try and do that for yourself. You can get an LLM, for example, to create you 50 headlines for your ad. And then maybe you could get it to write you 50 different image prompts to reflect those different headlines. But then you'd have to paste each of those image prompts one by one into Midjourney to create the asset, and then you've got to suck the whole thing into Photoshop to layer the text on top of the picture. Pretty boring process, and you might feel it's not sped things up greatly. But what Canva are trying to do is say, well, actually, just put all that data in one of our magic sheets, one of our Canva sheets. So you have your 50 headlines in one column, you have your image prompts in the next column, and maybe you've got a few other things, and it will actually then go away, take that data, and generate the complete asset from each row.
So they've kind of created their sort of AI workflow into something that's more like more something we're more used to, like a more traditional sort of format, I guess, using a sheet.
Maybe, yeah. And I think, well, they're kind of linking the power of a generative AI with the structured data of a spreadsheet, essentially. Yeah. And, we've all stored data in spreadsheets to say, well, these are the 10 options we're going to try, and these are the 5 channels we're going to do that in. What if you could just feed that to a language model that said, okay, I'll work out every combination and generate the asset for you?
Yeah, yeah.
So for marketing teams that are working across channels, to different audiences, and they're creating, LinkedIn carousels here and Instagram ads over there and all that kind of stuff, you can see how this can save a huge amount of time if the quality of the assets is good enough. Yeah,
and in a way that can be presented back to internal stakeholders as well, and in that kind of sheet format. So yeah, super interesting. We haven't had time to properly use it ourselves, but we use Canva quite a lot for our own marketing, so we are going to be definitely.
Yeah. They're building in. They're saying they're going to use the language model to translate content as well, so you can do multiple versions for localization. They're saying that they're going to be able to do automatically resize assets for different channels. So you'll be able to say whether you want it for Instagram, whether you want it for LinkedIn, whether you want it for YouTube or whatever. And they're saying that they can even use it to automatically create infographics, for example, if you've got a data set that you want to be able to represent in some way. Perhaps it's product options and a comparison matrix for the different products or services that you sell. How do you present that in a nice graphic? Yeah. It'll start to do that stuff automatically. They've got lots of example use cases on their website if you go to the AI tab on their, on the Canva interface. Great inspiration. We don't know how good it is yet. The proof is always in the pudding with these things. It's easy to say this stuff, it's hard to do. Yeah, we're going to be using it a bit over the next month, so we'll probably come back and report exactly. Back Emma is our Canva power user, so you will hear what's new in Creative AI June edition. We'll get the update. Yeah. Hold us to that. Okay. What are we on to next? And then what are we on to next?
Oh yeah, we were going to jump back to OpenAI because
Wouldn't be a what's new in creative AI without talking about OpenAI.
No,
In fact, we've
yeah.
already talked about them once. It wouldn't be one of
Yeah.
these episodes if we didn't talk about them twice.
multiple times. So last month we talked about the two new models then, which was O3 and O4 Mini.
Yes.
But this time we're going to talk. Well, hang on.
No, that's what we're talking about
O3.
now. Yeah.
Last
time we
your
talked
prompt
about-
notes confused me.
Last time we talked about ChatGPT 4.5.
Oh.
Roll over 4.5. We have O3.
Even
And
I get mixed up with them all, and I'm immersed in this every day. So
So-
don't get too caught up in the names.
O3 is their latest reasoning model.
O means reasoning.
I think it means OpenAI, actually.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
I thought it stood for. I thought the.
Yeah, I think well, anyway, who knows?
Well, but all the reasoning ones start with a.
They
Anyway,
do.
yep.
But O3 is their latest model. It is a step on from O1, which was their previous reasoning model. They skipped O2 for copyright reasons, because we all.
Yeah, of course.
I am a O2 subscriber.
Yeah.
And so what's cool about O3? Let's see, what is cool about O3?
What
So
is-
O3 is, firstly, it's a very powerful reasoning model. Secondly, it is multimodal. It can read images and it can generate images. Thirdly, it is a coder. It can write code and understand code and
I was
correct
meant to be
code.
saying this.
Oh, and I'll stop there. What was number
You
four?
said it all now.
Oh.
It's very good at math. Well, I mean, it is meant to be better at maths than the others, and science. So, but that means it's really great in our industry at research. Really very good at it, and far more accurate than other models that we would use every day.
And it's very good at coming up with ideas for imagery and then generating the imagery. Or it's very good at, if you give it lots of different imagery, combining them all into one. Or interpreting what is in each of those images and telling you what the common elements are, if you're mood boarding, for example. It's pretty smart. And it's also really good as a thinking partner. If you start brainstorming a problem with it and push the model hard, you know, that you've got to... those of you who have been through our courses and know how we... You know, it's not about the prompt, it's about the dialogue a lot of the time, is if you push the models hard, they can get very nuanced and very thoughtful and very useful. Really, really like, you know, having a super brainy person in the room with you, helping you out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm using it a lot. It is, I guess, the downsides of it is it's slower because you can see it thinking.
Yeah, you might wait 30 seconds or even a minute for an answer.
And you can see it chugging through the different things that it can use. So it might be coding 1 minute, it might be writing another minute, it might be reflect. You can see what it's doing, which is really interesting because it is sort of agentic and that it can switch itself, but what its task is to undertake what you've asked it to do, or what its not what its task is, what its
It's quite interesting.
process is.
It's quite interesting just watching it figure out the process of how to solve the problem. Jules has asked me this, so I'm going to have to look at that. But that's now telling me something else, which means I need to go over here. And but the document I'm referencing says this other thing, and you can follow that whole chain of thought. It's quite interesting.
And when we say it might take a long time, I mean like 1-2 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, considering what it's doing, it's no time at all.
Yeah.
But we've got a bit used to AI throwing back an answer in 2 seconds flat. This one, sometimes you'll wait.
Yeah, so it's kind of somewhere in between. I've forgotten the model number. The
0.5?
4.5. It's somewhere between 4.5 and deep research, I guess, is how I think about it in my head.
Okay.
Because its accuracy is higher. For the kind of tasks that we described, and it takes time to think.
I've
but
always
not as
wondered
long
what
as
goes
deep
on in
research.
Emma's head, by the way.
Hey!
Yeah.
But that's how I see it in my head.
Okay, great. Anyway, if you haven't tried O3, try it out. It's super powerful. It's in the drop-down list. You need to be on a paid plan. You should be anyway.
Yes.
So,
that
what's
segment
next?
went a bit all over the place.
Topic 5.
Yeah, we're gonna get back on track on this one.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to talk about just more platforms again. This time, Runway and Kling. So we're talking video generation.
Yeah, well, I mean, generally what's going on in platforms is... So, yeah, Runway have released version 4, by the way. It's been a year since they've dropped a big release. So version 4 doesn't have camera controls in it yet. Probably will soon. And Kling have released another video model, Kling 2.0, that a lot of people have been getting great results with. Now, you might be thinking, blimey, Jules, all of these video models, I don't want to have to keep a rest of 10 models, and which one's best for this and which one's best for that. And we at Spark definitely tell people not to get too stressed out about which model they're on. Unless video generation is 100% your job, then most of us can relax about this and just pick one and run with it. But what we are starting to see is companies try to tackle this problem. So one platform that's becoming popular is Krea, Krea.ai, and they aggregate lots and lots of models under one hood. So for one single subscription, you get access to 10 image models, from Flux to Ideogram to what have you, to Imagen, Google's one, and all the rest of it. And then on the video side, you get access to loads of video models, everything from Runway to VO2, etc., etc. So to Miniback. So you don't have to worry about which model to subscribe to anymore. You just get them all in one package, and you can literally choose which one you want to use for different projects or compare the outputs.
So this is interesting. I wonder if this is where where things are going to start to. Is it consolidate perhaps in some way? And it's interesting when you think about what Adobe's doing, and they're forming partnerships as well with OpenAI and Google.
Yeah, so do the models themselves kind of become commodities actually, and you access them through something else, through your Adobe apps or through Krea or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. So if you want a bit of tool anxiety taken away, get a Krea subscription and forget about everything else, because it gives you pretty much everything you need. The second thing that I think is interesting is I think we're starting to see the evolution of the tools again, which is at the moment, none of these tools are joined up, right? You create image prompts in ChatGPT perhaps, but then you've got to cut and paste the thing into Midjourney, then you get your picture, then you've got to save down your picture and upload it to Runway to use it as the start frame for your video, clunkety clunkety clunk, right?
Lots of subscriptions, lots of steps.
Yeah, and pretty boring workflow. So, a new platform that we've seen come out over the last couple of months, and I think is going to be really interesting for creative teams, is called Flora. And
its URL is florafauna.ai.
It is, yeah. But if you Google Flora.ai, you'll get it.
Yeah.
And so what are they doing that's interesting? Well, they're taking that Krea approach and saying, well, we'll give you access to every model. But they're also thinking about how do you solve this cut and paste problem? How do you build a workflow? And that's kind of automated between all of these different models. And so they've been inspired by Comfy UI. Those of you who dabble around with Stable Diffusion will know what I mean by Comfy UI. For those that don't, it's a sort of node-based way of controlling an image model. If you've seen the Faith video that we show in some of our courses, you'll know what I mean. And this allows you to join blocks of activity together. And within Flora, you can have a text model, you can have an image model, and you can have a video model, and you can join them together. So you could have the text model, could be ChatGPT, or you can choose Claude, or you can choose Gemini, and you can give it a prompt and say, okay, generate 10 ideas for this. The next step you could do is have another text block that reads the output of the previous one and says, okay, take idea 1 and turn it into an image prompt. And you could have another text block that takes the output and says, take idea 2 and turn it into an image prompt. Off each of those, you could then have an image block that would take the prompt and turn it into the image. And in fact, you could have multiple versions off each block that give you 5 different versions of that image. And then you could thread those over to video nodes, and you will have an animated version of that image as well. And the whole thing will work automatically. Imagine a storyboard. Imagine you've drawn out a storyboard by hand. You upload the storyboard, you connect a text block to it that reads each image in your storyboard. You have other text blocks that come off that write the image prompts for each of those frames of the storyboard. You then generate the image off each of those prompts and then the video off each of those images. And guess what? You've essentially created the draft animation of your film directly from the storyboard in 30 seconds. And it's repeatable. You can save these workflows, you can share them with your team, you can even collaborate, multiple users in the same environment, collaborating to build the workflows. I think that's kind of the next phase of these tools. I can see that being very popular. I've been playing around with it. It's pretty cool. The one drawback is you don't get all of the nuanced controls over the individual models that you do by using them natively.
No,
So
because you just get the controls that are in Flora.
yeah, I mean, it does vary. It does help you access some of what you can do with the models. So you can choose your aspect ratio, for example, and you can set a style reference and things like that. But in Runway, for example, you can't dictate the camera movements. You have to use prompting to do the camera movements instead of the little camera controls tool, for example. So, but maybe it will get there. I mean, but this tool has only been out like 2 months. So
I guess one of the two key big wins are that it really solves that fragmentation problem, and you have access to lots of models, and also that you don't have that clunkiness of your workflow, having to sort of download, copy, paste, all that stuff.
Switching between all these tabs in your browser.
Yeah, and then you have that workflow, rather than needing to manually create that workflow between tools, you have it saved.
Yeah, and you save it down and you can use it again next month on another project.
Yeah.
That's what's great about it.
And there's some certainty in that one subscription cost as opposed to the flux of different ones. So, really interesting.
Yeah, so I think Flora has a lot of potential. I'm sure the platform will evolve over time as well and get more sophisticated. But even right now, it's you can do some pretty interesting things with it. So have a look.
It's an interesting, different way of working, though, isn't it? With the nodes and the it's not how you would normally work as a creative, I guess.
Yeah, unless you've come from a sort of comfy UI side of things, unless you've come from the sort of creative technologist side, where I think it'll be pretty intuitive.
Yeah.
And so that's pretty interesting. I think so when you create workflows, you can share them with your team. You can also share them publicly. Most people probably wouldn't choose to do that, but some people have. So
unless you can monetize them.
Yeah, so there's a designer from Pentagram, for example, that has used it to develop fonts, and she's shared her workflow as a template you can use. So they have 20 or 30 different templates that you can use to get you started as well.
Maybe it's everything a good personal branding thing.
Product design to mood boarding to font creation, you name it. Yeah,
interesting. And I guess any potential drawbacks are things like kind of platform lock-in, like any of them. You get really used to the
well, if you've built all your workflow in the app, then you're kind of stuck in the app, right? And your switching cost is then very high. Yeah.
Exactly. And I guess there's probably a bit more you're slightly more removed as to what model is being used and the controls, I would suspect.
You might not get all of the granularity of control that you get if you use the model natively.
Yeah. And is the pricing system different?
It looks pretty fair. It looks pretty fair. It's a monthly subscription for a certain number of generation credits or whatever, as usual. Yeah. It looks pretty fair. They have an agency plan on there.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Check it out.
Definitely worth a look. So I think we are starting to see that next evolution of what these tools look like, that is starting to think about how do people actually use these things.
Yeah. Brilliant. So, final segment, AI out in the wild.
In the wild.
Yeah.
Out there. So where have we seen AI in the wild?
Yeah, so I think you've seen a few, actually.
In fact, right, okay, I meant to do this bit.
Over to you, because you wrote this bit.
I wrote this bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so do I get to look at the computer now?
Yeah, you can now.
Instead of just making it up. Okay, great.
Jules is much better at just, making stuff up than I am.
This is all highly true.
We don't make stuff up on here, though.
So, what do we got? Pinterest. People have been complaining on Pinterest that Pinterest is just filling up with AI slop. Which I think is a microcosm of the internet as a whole. I think we are seeing generally the internet filled with AI-generated slop, and so Pinterest are now starting to label what they think is AI-generated content on there and limit the amount that people can pin to boards and all that sort of stuff. So I think this is kind of interesting. We're starting to see people rebel against mediocre, mass-produced AI content. What does this mean for the work that we do? There is still always going to be a world for carefully thought through, beautifully designed stuff. AI can help you do very well thought through, beautifully designed stuff, but it also allows you to take a lot of shortcuts and produce thousands and thousands of bits of dross.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people are leaning into the dross. Not a day goes by on LinkedIn without some creator showing me how they've used ChatGPT to do some amazing picture and say graphic design is dead, but they're clearly not a graphic designer, because if you look at the thing they've created, you would never use it in a million years. So, anyway, Pinterest. So,
then he wants to talk about H&M.
Yeah, so H&M...
They come up often. H&M are doing a lot in
Yeah,
this
so
space.
what are H&M doing? So they have, we've talked before about Hugo Boss using AI-generated video imagery to launch their campaigns back at the start of the year.
We talked about Mango.
We've talked about Mango with their teen sports campaigns using AI-generated imagery, which they all labelled as AI-generated, but they were very convincing. Like, you'd have to look hard to think that that wasn't photography. The latest thing we're seeing with H&M is they're actually they've actually formed licensing agreements with 12 of their models to actually create AI-generated versions.
When we say models this time, we mean humans.
Human models, yeah. Not OpenAI 03. We mean real people who wear clothes and get photographed for a living. They have actually created essentially digital twins of these 12 models, licensing their likeness. It's a non-exclusive agreement. Those models can continue to have their modelling careers and go off and do other stuff, but H&M can now create those people and dress them in any clothing that they've created. So
for the models, they get to be in more than one place at one time.
Yeah. For the photographer, you don't get to do the shoot anymore. And for the retoucher, you don't get to retouch it anymore. So, there's job displacement going on here, but what it will mean for H&M is they can probably get a campaign up on the website a couple of weeks quicker than they were able to previously, because you don't need to do the photo shoot anymore. In fact, you can be producing all of the imagery whilst the samples are still shipping their way over from wherever they're manufactured. And in fact, you might even not need to wait for samples anymore. Yeah, you're producing the campaign whilst the production run is in process. So you can see how for them, this is about speed to market. And in fast fashion, that's a really important thing. So that's that.
Moving on to, can AI be funny?
Can AI be funny? If you've ever asked ChatGPT to come up with a joke, they're either very strange and not funny at all, or they're like typical kind of dad humour.
It's not something I've tried before, but you have a lot of dad humour, so maybe you got on well with it.
In my photography days, when you had to get somebody to smile, you needed a lot of safe for work jokes. And Instagram was a good place for that, actually. But ChatGPT is not. But what people have been thinking, one of the things we talk about is AI creative, right? And the terrible secret is that actually it is quite creative. And people were testing memes, seeing how good was AI at coming up with memes. And so they put a bunch of people in a room, told them to come up with a bunch of memes. Some of them were able to use AI, some of them weren't. And guess what? The average meme that was created by the AI, the AI memes on average scored higher than the human memes. They thought they were funnier and had better viral potential. Except the very best ones still came from you and me, still came from the flesh and blood. But it's interesting that, these tools raise the bar of what good looks like.
That's a really similar finding to the Ethan Wharton study that we talked about in the last episode.
The Procter and Gamble study.
Yeah.
Exactly. These things raise the average. And so, for us, if we have to use the AI to be better than the AI on its own. And that involves using your brain, thinking hard, interrogating the outputs hard, and using these tools properly. And not just switching your brain off, because your client is going to be able to produce something that's not crap, and you have to be able to produce something better than that. Something
that's good enough, essentially. So something brilliant that takes human plus AI.
And then finally, in an interesting twist, there's an Italian newspaper that has been called Foglio. I can't do Italian.
That's pretty good.
Well, we don't know if that's pretty good.
Well, it sounded great.
Il Foglio. And they have been experimenting with AI in journalism, like quite publicly. They're an Italian broadsheet, and they have produced their first ever completely AI-written broadsheet. So they still had editors deciding what the stories were going to be, but then they got AI to write the stories, they got it to write the op-eds, and in fact they even got it to write the letters to the editor. for a bit of fun. Anyway, they're trying to highlight, what is truth and what is not truth and where is all this going, and trying to make a bit of a statement about it all, as well as, I think, probably learn themselves about what are the ways that you can use AI
really
for journalism.
To take it to an extreme to see where the right level is for them.
And apparently, the writing was, perfectly good. Pretty pedestrian, but it didn't include any quotes from anybody. There were no interviews.
Because there were no journalists going out getting them.
Yeah, and they don't actually want to give a quote that isn't real.
Yeah.
So, they're still journalists at heart. So, the stuff had to be truthful. Be interesting to see how they fact-checked all of the stuff. But anyway, so there's people kind of experimenting with this stuff and seeing what happens. And I thought that was quite an interesting one to bring up.
It really is, yeah.
Part of my family lives in Italy, is Italian, in fact, and so I should find out if this has made waves in Italy at all, actually.
Yeah, let's get in touch.
Get the WhatsApp out.
Yeah, maybe we need to do a live interview next time of them about it. So, I think that's it.
So, folks, that is it. Welcome to May. That was what was new in creative AI.
It was. We will see you next episode.
Yeah, have we got anything coming up?
Between now and then, we might have one webinar. We've definitely got a webinar on the 3rd of June with Kate Ross from 8 and 4 and Luke Taylor from United Us. We're going to be talking about why differentiation as an agency in terms of like brand positioning is super important in a world with AI. For many of the reasons that we've touched on today.
So, what does AI mean for differentiating your agency? Tune in on June the 3rd.
Yeah, we might have one more webinar before that. Also, we'll have another episode before then, but we're going to be in Cannes this year in less than 6 weeks.
See you there.
5 weeks, see you there. We're also going to be at the AI Summit. We're going to be giving a workshop. I'm going to be chairing a panel.
That's in London at the beginning of June.
Yep.
The 11th of June?
Yep. Yes, 11th and 12th.
11th of June.
And there's one other one of the, like something like that.
We're going to be at MadFest.
We're going to be there.
See you there.
Yeah. So, love to see any of you.
Spark road trip in June.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye.